welcome back. We got a lot to cover today. I got a huge amount of notes in front of me. We are going to talk about this SEO situation. Is SEO dying or dead? And what are we doing about it? I want to introduce this idea called the influence equation and how powerful that can be. A lot of founders haven't taken advantage of. I'm also going to touch a little bit on the Lindy principle, and at the end, we'll round it off with some talk about effective meetings. For those of you that are super business nerds. Just at the top, I was talking to Ian last night on the phone, as we often do, like the 10 o'clock phone call. And we were just talking about like the progression we've seen in the community. And for those of you new to the show, just a quick, journey down memory lane. This podcast basically started with this concept of just a couple bucks in a backpack. What if we could just cover our living expenses? Jump into this world of, hey, we have the freedom now to explore the world, but importantly, we have our time back. The first few years for me when I was out of a job and I could control my location and time were completely life-changing moments. And we started to use that time to meet a lot of you and to see that, especially in the early days, it was in the wake of that financial crisis in 2008. A lot of people maybe lost faith in their careers and jobs. And the reality is we weren't meeting a ton of people from elite careers and elite institutions. A lot of us came from the middle, just had normal jobs. And we sort of saw this idea that the internet could be a reliable way to build a business and achieve this kind of, especially location and time freedom. And so for me in the early days, it was really like, can I cover my rent while I'm on the road and explore this opportunity? It wasn't too long after that we started the DC community. That was in 2011, because we wanted a place to gather with other folks who were sharing ideas about how to do this. And the theme of the show pretty quickly turned to like, well, what if we could generate like $10,000 a month with our online businesses? That would be amazing in terms of income for the founders. And I think recently, especially, speaking with a lot of DC Black members, we put a premium tier into our membership, and connecting with a lot of people with 7 and 8 figure businesses is a lot of it is like this kind of path to $250,000, $500,000, $1 million plus in earnings annually. And while maintaining control of the business, while maintaining the lifestyle flexibility, while maintaining the time flexibility. And I just wanted to outline that at the top because it's been a while since I've sort of done a reckoning of the theme of the podcast. But personally, I've been super interested in founders who are making $500,000 or more from their internet businesses a year, connecting with them, trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, how they're adjusting to changes. And just sort of the vibe and the zeitgeist. So if you're a new listener around here, I think a lot of what we talk about can apply to any state of the journey. But one of the things we're really focused on in these founders who've cracked the nut of being able to get their earnings from their company to $500,000, $1 million and beyond. And then what do their prospects look like for longevity, for exiting the business and all those sorts of things. And it's different than a lot of the businesses I hear about on other shows, because we're not talking about getting investors involved. We're not talking about being a part of the in crowd in New York or San Francisco. We're not talking about necessarily sitting at our desks in one particular location for 5 years and working 10 hours a day. And so I think all those things sort of come together and sort of speak to what, in my mind at least, the Tropical MBA is all about. It's being in charge of your income, being in charge of your time, and being in charge of your location. And as we've progressed the show over the years and met more and more of you that are having incredible success, it's about getting those numbers up while not compromising those core values. So I just wanted to say that at the top. I guess because SEO, search engine optimization, the main street of the internet has been such a big part of this journey. So I want to pivot into this question of, is SEO dying in 2025? For many of us, including myself, the concept of Google, one company, basically creating a main street on the internet that you could live there rent free. With elbow grease and knowledge of how their system worked, you could have a storefront on this main street where there was a lot of buyers with high intent, and many of us did. We built a business that was quite sizable, basically through organic search. And when I look at the listeners of this show, many of you that have 7 and 8 figure businesses, over the years, the primary channel of acquisition has been organic SEO. And tack onto that, many of us that have agencies rely on organic SEO as something we sell to our clients or our primary source of leads. We count the leads every month at Remote First Recruiting. We get a lot of people finding us by searching for talent in Latin America. People will call us every month from that organic SEO. And so the question I think that we're all asking is, what's going on with SEO? And tactically and from a mindset perspective, what do we need to change in 2025 to adjust to this? So I just want to sort of set the scene of what I'm seeing. I'm talking to a bunch of you about this. And, I think we're going to see some really dramatic fundamental change. And we've already seen a lot of stuff. Like, let me just point to some things. One of the things that kind of like shocked our community late last year is that Authority Hacker closed down their flagship courses. Now, Gail and Mark are members of the DC, and they're incredible founders. And this was like a super high character move. It's something you rarely see on the web. I'll quote Gail here. After 10 years of teaching SEO, we're closing our flagship courses. And no, SEO isn't dead, but the content site model is. When Mark Webster and I started Authority Hacker in 2014, building content sites was the perfect business model for new entrepreneurs. Low barrier to entry, predictable growth, solid ROI. But in 2024 and going forward, that model is broken for most people. Now, what's remarkable about this, and I think this is why Gail and Mark have, over the years, built so much, for lack of a better term, authority and brand equity, is that they've always sought to do the right thing for their clients and be authentic to what can help people build businesses on the web. Gail goes on to say, I refuse to sell courses teaching strategies that no longer work reliably for most people. He didn't need to do that. He could have tweaked it. He could have kept it going. And I think on one thing, I just want to, shout out to Mark and Gail. It's incredible. I know their next thing is going to be incredible. But importantly, look, these guys are experts, and they're saying this content site model is donezo for the most part. And this, I've been seeing in my inbox. I've been speaking directly with people who've seen a 90% decrease in revenue from affiliate sites that were affiliate platforms that relied on Google organic search to drive traffic to their product listings, to, booking sites and other types of things like that. So, and you can even think about it personally, like, how has your internet behavior changed? Like, if you're going to go on a trip, might you just go to ChatGPT and say, well, what are the best things to do in this town? We used to rely on Google Organic for that. Or, well, what are the best products in this category? As this, we've all been on those like top 10 ranking sites. It's like, well, is this product here because there's an affiliate link to Amazon, or is this product here because it was a good review? And then all of a sudden, products like ChatGPT come along and they give us what feels like a more authentic listing or ranking. And now the search behavior changes. And I just think it's kind of interesting to just marvel at what that arbitrage on Google's main street looked like in the past, call it 10, 15 years. Like, surrounded, you have this paid ad situation, which over the years got more and more aggressive. In the early days at Google, you would type in your search query and it would be people writing personal blogs about products they liked. Entrepreneurs saw the opportunity and started creating content that serviced the algorithm. And now all of a sudden, fast forward many, many years and brands are on board with this because now Google prioritizes brands. And so now Business Insider has a top 10 list of pocket knives, which is totally random. But this is a situation we found ourselves in. And I think all of us knew this wasn't going to last forever, but it was a moment in time. It was an opportunity that entrepreneurs took advantage of. But, I've been speaking with a lot of DCers about this. And one of the fascinating things is like just how much of an arbitrage it was and why it was such a big opportunity for our community, because the amount that you would have to pay for the ads on the sidebar on the top of Google versus what you were getting in the organic rankings was often a 10x factor in terms of cost. And that's stunning. That's a huge entrepreneurial opportunity. And a lot of it is going away in 2025. And I wanted to highlight it. There's been a tweet going around talking about HubSpot's traffic, for example. Their traffic dropped 80% at one point. They had like 7 million views a month through all this helpful content they were generating. And I remember them being held up as the darling of people who were doing SEO the right way. Like, hey, you have a high intention key term. Like, how do I organize people in my CRM or whatever? And you get this long 5,000 word article from HubSpot, super helpful, driving leads for them, adding value to the internet. And all that stuff's gone away. 80% of their traffic is gone. This appealed to us on many dimensions because we could create SOPs, get a bunch of people offshore generating content for us, and put this stuff on rails, and it generated reliable revenue for many of our businesses. And I just think it's stunning to see, the dominoes falling, the world changing, and as it does, new opportunities. So I bring all this up just to sort of set the tone a little bit. A lot of us are in a position where we're reselling these services onto companies that maybe there's a knowledge gap between us and our clients, and we're not sure how to communicate this stuff, not sure what the longevity of these strategies are going to be in 2025. And so I'm really curious to hear from you. My email is dan@tropicalmba.com. If you're being affected by this, it's a story I want to track this year and try to identify ways that founders are effectively pivoting away from this organic channel and facing the reality of 2025. Okay. What I want to do now is talk about something called the influence equation. One of the ways to adjust when we can no longer just sort of pump out, quote, helpful content, and we have to think more from a media perspective. So if you think about like Google represented the main street, when people want to go shopping, they go downtown to the main street, and it doesn't really matter how good your music store is. If you're the music store who paid the rent, you're going to show up there. So where are your target customers? Well, they're probably in their living room on their phone, right? Or on their laptop or flipping through Netflix. And it's a different mindset that they're in. They're not captive to the main street. They're not in a high intent mode necessarily. Well, how do we capture that attention and be persuasive? Well, how do we adjust to meeting our target market when they're in the living room? And I mention this because so many of us are in this sort of helpful content Main Street perspective. And I actually think this is an enormous opportunity for those of us in the B2B space. Why is your prospect watching a guitar video or Netflix when they could be reading an annual report or an in-depth deep dive into a client case study or something that really hammers out very unique, specific information that ministers to and solves their problem? So let me just cut to the chase here. This concept of the influence equation. There's a stat that I pulled up that says that consumers are 70% more likely to buy from you after 30 plus minutes engaging with a brand. And if you're in B2B, you already know this because a lot of your clients are coming through word of mouth and referrals. So word of mouth and referrals is just super high fidelity media, right? You're caught captive by somebody at a dinner party and they're gushing to you about your SEO service provider or your paid ads person or your YouTube editor, or something like the Dynamite Circle gets tons of referrals in this way. Like people are talking about the fact that they went to DCBKK. And essentially what that situation is doing is hacking this fundamental threshold of the influence equation, which is I've spent 30 minutes now engaged with this brand. I'm way more likely to do business with them. And I just think it's remarkable that how few of us as founders have the opportunity for a 30-minute media engagement with the brand. And this is fundamentally the influence equation, which is you take your level of credibility, and that could be how you present or package or talk about your track record or the proof that you and your brand can do what you say you can do. And you combine that with time and the medium under which you're presenting. This all equals influence. So an example of a highly influential piece of content would be like a documentary, that's really well presented and presents the filmmaker as someone who really understands this topic. Think about how much you're likely to trust that filmmaker at the end of the documentary. And I think this is why a lot of influencers are actually coming out with documentaries about themselves, because they understand the influence equation. The good news for B2B founders, which most of us are, is that I think our audiences are hungry for hyper-specific media about the problems we solve. After all, they're willing to get on sales calls with you. They're willing to spend thousands and thousands of dollars with you. Why wouldn't they engage with a piece of media that addresses the same kinds of challenges? And just like SEO, just like Main Street, you can do this once and it can go to work for you while you sleep, and it can work time and time again. I think one of the most profound revelations on this podcast last year was Shane Hummus, YouTube superstar, coming to the show with receipts. And I looked at this information. This is credible. How very low view count videos on YouTube are leading to millions of dollars in revenue. And his point is exactly this. These are the founders who've hacked the influence equation. They know that prospects need to spend 30 minutes with your brand. And at that point, according to one study, they're 70% more likely to do business with you. Yet, most of us have not done this. Why? Because SEO has been too easy, because we're not in the mindset of putting ourselves front and forward. We don't think the challenges are that interesting, or we tailor what we do to each and every client. And so there's not one thing we feel confident speaking on. I just want to challenge everyone out there that finds themselves in this boat to ask yourself, what could we create that would capture the attention of our target market for 30 minutes or more? It could be a copy of an interview of you and your founder story on a podcast like this, or a podcast in your niche. In fact, I've had guests on this show, and we talked about personal entrepreneurial journey stuff, not even about necessarily the problem they solved the whole time, run paid ads to the Tropical MBA show because they realized the influence equation, that your prospect spent 30 minutes with you. Could be talking about your life. It could be talking about your passions. But here we are, 30 minutes in, I'm 70% more likely. Look at Warren Buffett's annual letters. They're incredible. Read one. Sit with the gentleman as he talks about his failures, his losses, how he thinks about the market. At the end, you're doing one thing. You're holding Berkshire Hathaway stock. It's the influence equation. And a lot of us say, okay, yes, I need to do this, so I'm going to go post on social media. But it misses this critical step of, well, how many tweets is it going to take me to get to 30 minutes? A lot. So if I like one of your pieces of discoverable content, like an Instagram post, like a Facebook post, where am I going to hang out with you for 30 minutes? Is it a report? Is it a podcast interview? Is it a long form YouTube video? Is it a newsletter? Is it a book? Is it a white paper? It's one of these things that we kind of know we all should do this, but for some reason we're not doing it. And maybe this SEO upheaval thing can finally be the kick in the butt for us to assert ourselves and say, you know what I do? I get on sales calls all month. I manage a team. I'm engaged in this problem for years now. Maybe I could be an expert or just have an honest opinion about one element of it. And I'm going to put it out there for a very small niche audience. And guess what? For the people that do read it, they're 70% more likely to engage me in a deal, in a purchase, in a partnership. It's extremely powerful. Most of us don't do it. And so I just wanted to mention it here. The influence equation. My challenge to you, beyond your website, what sits in the middle? Where can I spend 30 minutes with you? And is it optimized to drive quality leads to your business? Okay. One way to think about this, and I've spoken with a bunch of founders about this in January so far, which is, a lot of us have relied so much on SEO, word of mouth, and referrals that we've like sort of put content out under the Main Street mindset, where again, buyers are high intent. And so the type of content is different from influential media content. Perhaps you could think about positioning yourself as a problem solver by saying, here's the problem I solve, here's the unique way I solve it, here's proof I can solve it, is an interesting next step. Asserting yourself as someone who's very credible at focus on one critical problem out there in the world for your target market and having the receipts there. And then, okay, well, what do I do about this 30-minute media hurdle talking about? Well, simply tell your story. Start off with telling your story, or tell the story of your clients, or talk about the problems you solve. Talk about the unique ways you've deciphered to solve them. Talk about some of the ways it can go wrong. Talk about some of the ways it can go right. The right audience is going to be interested in this. If not, you're kind of on the wrong thing, but these things work on your sales calls, right? So what is the generalizable principle that works for a few hundred people in the world that want this super narrow, deep thing solved? And how can they be a part of your brand while they're passive and relaxing on their couch and saying, you know what, man, this seems like a great opportunity for my company, versus when, they're at the intent stage and they're tracking you down and booking calls on your calendar. So we're just meeting them on a different spot. And again, you don't need, like when a lot of us like sort of transition to social, we look at famous, YouTubers or people on Instagram and we think we got to do that kind of content. That's not the case for B2B. There's still an enormous opportunity. Ian and I call it the end of the tracks. If you're really passionate about a problem, whether it's in the consumer world, like for me, it's like, currently cable routing on my guitar rig. I've listened to every piece of content about it, and I need more because I'm like at the end of the content tracks. Well, the content tracks run out a lot sooner in B2B spaces. It's like, okay, I have like 15 employees. I run a business that does private memberships, blah, blah, blah. I'm out of content. Like if someone has a very specific, way to frame the challenges I face that I haven't yet seen, I will watch that. I will engage that. And I'm way more likely to be a client of that person who's produced that media. And that was, I think, why, particularly last year, we got so many emails after talking to Shane Hummus, after talking to Alex Barker, because they're people that are positioning this very niche content on the web, doesn't need to blow up, and seeing huge results from it. So there you go. It is the influence equation. All you got to do is sit down and just take a look at these variables. The variables are credibility, time, medium, and that equals influence. So the medium is important too, right? Certain mediums are more persuasive than other ones. Social media post, not as persuasive as a YouTube video, not as persuasive as a podcast, not as persuasive as a documentary. So you can think about that. That medium is going to change depending on your niche and your product and stuff, but something to consider there. Okay, I've talked about this enough. 30 minutes. Do you have it? If not, what kind of opportunity could that represent for your business? I just want to leave you with this Lindy principle is everywhere. And Gail mentioned it. We talked about Gail's post, a co-founder of Authority Hacker, and he said, this was reliable for some time. It was a new opportunity and then it went away. And you look at Google itself the Lindy principle simply says that the amount of time something's going to be around is probably about the amount of time that it's already been around. So most of the things in our life are very, very durable. They've been around for a long time. They're likely to be around about that long in the future. And my favorite examples are what are we more likely to read in 1,000 years, the Bible or the 4-hour work week? Some of you are saying they're the same thing, but, probably the Bible because it's been around. The Lindy principle points to something's durability. And it's interesting because we want to know the things that are durable and that are going to be around. If we're looking for a guiding principle for our lives or for our businesses, it helps to look for Lindy things, for things that we can count on being around in the future. But then there's this concept of like a Lindy slip. There's things that sort of break through and are not durable. They're new, right? And our job as entrepreneurs is to figure out, well, how long will this thing exist into the future? And if I get on early, will it be durable? And if I bet on it, will I be right? And will it affect my business? And you see this with things like Google itself, with SEO, with Bitcoin, with AI. And we've seen it with countless marketing channels. If you were a content person early in on the Facebook newsfeed, that many guests on the show, their career, they built wealth because they saw something new in the Facebook feed. Others have done that when they saw the rise of Twitter, when others have done that with Instagram, and others have done that with SEO. And so I think as things are changing, it's just a reminder for me that I think most things in our businesses are going to be durable. Perhaps the way we do our financials, the way we manage teams, the way we do books. But as founders, we're always looking for that one small insight, something that's changing that maybe not everybody believes in yet, that we're right about. And we don't always need to be the first involved. I look at YouTube as an example. I remember when founders would openly mock people investing in YouTube, openly mock it. And now we have Shane Hummus coming on the show saying, right now, there is an opportunity for B2B niche content. People are hungry for it. They're at the end of the content tracks, and now they're watching a cat video or an instructional video or something that's not on the topic of their core problem. Could you be the person that provides that to that platform right now? This is akin to the SEO opportunity 5 years ago, perhaps for your brand. And I just want to point that out. Even though some doors are closing, there's always new doors opening. That's the life of running a business. I think great businesses rely on effective meetings, and effective meetings are one of our most powerful toolkits to creating excellent businesses. But because as founders, we typically don't like meetings and we didn't like meetings in our jobs, we kind of suck at them and we try to avoid them. What I want to encourage founders to do is simply just be better at them. You don't have to have more of them. You just have to be better. I run a multi-million-dollar business. I have 12 team members. We do it 100% remotely. Here's some of my top tips. So the first is, if possible, to always meet in the presence of a scoreboard, which is the key stats that you track as a company or that functional team tracks. So, you don't need to have a ton of sophistication or details if you can see the score as you're talking. Like, are we winning? Are we losing? Are we being effective? It's just like a football team. You're huddling up underneath the scoreboard. You don't need a whole game plan. You just need to play. It's like, look, we're behind by a score. So we're meeting right now. Let's get moving. Number two is, as a founder, you don't have to run meetings at all. You should always delegate that to the leader of the meeting. Simple as that. Number three, and something that I think been challenging for us, we're working towards, is having clear accountability and ownership over every issue that comes up. Try not to use meetings as a chance to diffuse the accountability over multiple people, but always trying to identify an owner of the deliverable and when that deliverable will occur. Number 4, experiment with the Bezos memo framework. There's this excellent book called Working Backwards where they describe the framework Amazon uses to have meetings. Essentially, you write a 6-page memo and the entire team reads the memo live in the room before they have a discussion. This presses your strategic thinking to the next level. And you can do this, right? You've already delegated the meeting to a team member. You can take it to the next step and amp it up by having that team member deliver a memo in advance of the meeting. You can even read the memo as a group before you start discussion. Number 5, think about how cadence, or basically how often you're meeting with whom, is a critical recipe in this entire thing. So one of the things we've done is we've just deleted all standing one-on-ones on the team, and we do a daily 15-minute huddle. This cadence speeds up the deliverables and the accountability. So in the past, we'd have standing one-on-one functional team meetings, and the problem was the cadence was weekly. So often people would wait a whole week in order to get the deliverables ready to do the thinking required to do the work, or worse yet, they would wait until the meeting to actually do the work in the meeting. So now what happens if you shorten the meeting? So you have to do the thinking and the work outside of the meeting. So it's not an hour and a half standing where we're working there. We're actually having to prepare and work because we need to be efficient in the 15 minutes. We've deleted all our one-on-ones and our standing functional team meetings. Now we're amping up the cadence and things get going every single day. So just one decision leads to less meeting time and more deliverables happening faster. And as a bonus to this, meeting more regularly with shorter intervals with more prep actually keeps things simple. Whereas when you put a meeting out there on the calendar and we're going to solve these big problems and everybody's going to come to that meeting, those meetings tend to balloon and slow down the progress of the company. So keep things simple by keeping it shorter, doing more prep, and speeding up your cadence. That's it. Those are my meeting tips for right now. Even though the fact that in theory we don't like meetings make our meetings suck and not go to work for us as founders. In fact, they're an extremely powerful way to keep control and progress in your business.